Nigel Farage from nowhere, really, when we came in today. Got him on the show for 20 minutes. What do you think, Alastair Campbell, leave means, if that makes sense?
Well, leave means leave has been around for a while. I mean, I think all this is showing is that Nigel Farage still has the capacity to get the media talking about him, which, of course, is what he loves. He's never left. He's been one of the most high-profile voices on the Brexit side of the argument before, during, and since the referendum. So I don't think it's that big a deal, to be absolutely frank. Nigel Farage is a very high-profile, active, pro-hard Brexit campaigner, and that's what he'll carry on doing, just as others will campaign on the other side. And also, I think this idea that Nigel Farage is criticising other politicians for being, as it were, career politicians. I mean, his whole life has been as a career politician in the European Parliament, trying to do it in from within. So I don't think we should get too excited. I think what I do get excited about is the fact that I think that the so-called what he refers to as the will of the people, as though that is a fixed thing that never changes, is changing.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because of the lies that were told, of the laws that were broken, of the fact that the Brexit that was promised is not happening.
This is what I want to ask you, and I'm delighted that we are able to talk to you, because I used to do this 15, 20 years ago. So to be able to come back and do this and talk about things that matter is important. Alastair, you were at the forefront of British politics with Tony Blair, and you saw about, probably more than anybody in this country, how you can garner a response. The whole country turned to New Labour. My question is this: whether Nigel Farage is a conviction politician or it's all about Nigel. Let's go back to the debate. You just touched upon it. He said, and I quote, "I waited a year for this moment." So if one's cynical, you could say he knew what was coming, or he's biding his time. But my thing is when this debate started, when Cameron stuck his head out and said we must remain, and lost the premiership over it, and when Boris and Gove, the buses and all the promises. One simple question to start, Alastair Campbell. Do you think the British people, when they voted to leave Brexit, right, do you think that those people in their majority were aware of what was going to happen? Do you think enough was told? Do you think people were informed enough? Because I get the impression every day that passes that none of us really were aware of almost anything to do with Brexit, and that's the issue, isn't it?
Well, listen, it was a terrible campaign in many, many ways. I mean, you mentioned the Boris Johnson, Michael Gove buses and the promises for the health service. Now, that was a very, very effective campaign tactic from the Leave side, but it was a complete and total lie. Likewise, on the Remain side, the Leave campaign were able to project it as so-called Project Fear. But I do think this. I mean, you mentioned David Cameron there, and I mean, I won't echo what Danny Dyer said about our esteemed former Prime Minister, but he does have an awful lot to answer for.
Yeah, he does, yeah.
This referendum was called on an assumption by him, and to be fair, by most other people, that it was not going to be lost. Now, and if you remember, we talked about Nigel Farage a moment ago. Farage, a couple of days before the referendum, said, because he was expecting to lose, he said, if it's 52-48, then that will not be settled and we might have to do it again. So I think that David Cameron set in train a process that, frankly, that campaign, the issues were not elucidated during that campaign. Now, we can, both sides blame each other. I think the media has a very, very big...
Yeah, but Alastair, quick question. You say that there were lies on both sides. Completely accept that, right? But did the people who were peddling those lies, did the politicians actually, this is my question, did they understand the complete impact of Brexit? Did they have the information at hand? We talk about lies and trying to get a vote, but I don't see that the people that we were voting for really knew what was going on.
Well, if you look, on the Remain side, on the Cameron-George Osborne side, yes, they did, because in a sense they were saying, we're going to effectively be having the status quo. So that was fairly straightforward. On the Leave side, no. And you only have to look at the faces of Boris Johnson and Michael Gove on the day after the referendum, when it was clear that they had won. I mean, they looked like two kids who'd just been caught shoplifting, and were about to get six of the best from their...
A bit like Trump when he won, yeah?
Well, no, it was even worse than that, because I don't think they ever expected it to happen. Now, it has happened, and the reason why I've got involved in this People's Vote campaign to try to get a People's Vote on the final deal is because I think that what the country is now debating, what the country is now considering, what the country is now looking at as the reality of Brexit looms is so different. Now, Farage and Rees-Mogg and Nigel Lawson and Owen Paterson and Ian Duncan-Smith and John Redwood, these figures of the right, and they are all pretty much right-wing now. The people who are really pushing this, I've always felt that hard Brexit is a project of the right, for the right, by the right. And they are pushing this agenda because I think they know that they've never been able to win popular support for this kind of profoundly anti-European stance in a general election. They've won it in a referendum, but I do think they worry that the will of the people is changing.
Yeah, but if that's the case,
if to get it over the line quickly.
I understand that, but if this is, in the words of the people who want to remain, if this is the worst economic decision the UK could possibly ever have made, right? You name all those politicians. They are okay. Nigel is vocal and does a good job, but there are intelligent, smart politicians, right? Why would they, in a momental moment of madness and self-harm to them and the country, why would they do that unless they don't believe in this? That's what I don't understand.
No, I'm not saying they don't. They do believe in it. They look, somebody like Ian Duncan-Smith and Owen Paterson and John Redwood, they've been passionately Eurosceptic for generations. Yeah. For their entire political lives. So no, they believe it. But my point is, it's a very, very right-wing vision of the world. I mean, you may know I'm editor-at-large of the New European, and I've written two pieces in the last couple of weeks about a book a guy asked me to read. He begged me to read it. He says, unless you read this book, you don't understand Brexit. And, I thought, okay, here we go. But I did read it, and I got totally stuck into it. And it's a book called The Sovereign Individual. And the reason this guy thought it was significant, and the reason why I actually agree with it, was because one of the co-authors was William Rees-Mogg, former editor of the Times, father of Jacob. Now, I've got kids, and I'm not pretending that, your kids inherit all your views, but, I'm pleased to say all my kids are Labour, and they're all pro-European.
Well, we'll get on to that in a minute. We'll get on to Labour in a minute. Let's talk about Brexit.
But Jacob Rees-Mogg, my point about Jacob Rees-Mogg is that this vision in this book, The Sovereign Individual, that's what it's about. I mean, the politics in you says, hold on a minute, Jacob Rees-Mogg has got this massive hedge fund, this fund that he controls, multi-millions, and he gets a bit of political grief because he's shipping the money out to Ireland. But actually, you read this book and you understand that is what this is about. It's about how do you get a politics where the people of wealth are able to protect that wealth.
So you're saying that the majority of people behind Brexit are politicians who have done well, who are trying to protect their own. No,
I'm just saying that. No, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that I do believe you can get some Labour supporters for leave, and you can get some Labour MPs in Parliament for a hard Brexit. Yeah. But I'm saying that the real drivers of this now are very much on the right, and that's one of the reasons why I do wish the Labour Party would have a much stronger stance against it.
Well, therein lies the argument. Just a couple of questions, quick questions before we talk Labour. Can Brexit, in your mind, Alastair Campbell, can it ever work? Under what circumstances? How can it ever work?
Look, I don't think the world's going to end, but I do think that sometimes in history, I think countries sometimes choose their own decline, whether by accident or by design. And I do think this is a case of a country choosing its own decline. Will it work practically? I think one of the reasons why the public opinion is changing is because the real questions that are now starting to arise are really, I think, starting to scare people. I mean, not many weeks ago, we had all this talk about stockpiling food and medicines. Well, yeah. Nobody mentioned that during the referendum, either on the Leave side or on the so-called
so much
side.
That's my other thing. So much wasn't said on either side. You said it already. Both sides almost lied. It was almost, and the British people fell for it. Do you think that if Brexit doesn't happen, we go back to it, it is a fact, 53% of the British public voted to leave the European Union. Will the British people have a right to feel cheated? What if you and your lot are right and we get a second referendum and by a narrow majority we decide to reverse that and stay? What about the people that voted the first time? A referendum is surely about the people getting what they decide.
Yeah, but that is to say that the will of the people never changes. So yeah. I think that, look, you have to accept that we lost the referendum, and I do accept that. But I think the reason why the Brextremists, as I call them, are so desperate just to get this over the line in March next year and just whatever's happening, just let's get it done, is because I think they do worry that the will of the people is changing, and the people are entitled to change their mind. And I think that, look, direct answer to your question, would there be, potentially difficult consequences? Yes, they would. But I'm afraid this is why I go back to the point that David Cameron set in train a process that maybe inevitably was going to lead to considerable difficulty for the country.
And isn't the irony, Alastair, that he didn't need to do that? Because politically, I suspect, as I'm sure you do, that it was to head off UKIP, who ended up winning one seat. Then all of a sudden he's got a referendum promise he's got to carry it through. Listen, you worked with Tony Blair for years. You will never be able to explain to me the following. If you are the Prime Minister of this country with a majority and the British people want a referendum, you give it, you step back and you implement what they decide. The guy would still be in 10 Downing Street, which, of course, as you quite rightly say, and people who are sceptical about Cameron, you ran at the first sign of trouble. You could have stayed and implemented the British people's will. What we've ended up with is a woman who was a Remainer who's having to push through a Brexit against her own party.
I mean, I think, look, I argued with David Cameron at the time and said I was not convinced that he had to have the referendum. He was absolutely convinced that he had no choice. Now, and he might argue that the reason that UKIP did badly in that election, the reason that he got a majority was in part because he promised the referendum. And that may be true. However, you look at where he is now, and I think what happened was he felt that because he won the Scottish, No won the Scottish referendum, because he got a majority against Ed Miliband, I think he felt sort of a little bit invincible. I'm afraid I think the old Etonian swagger and arrogance and hubris came in. And Theresa May now, you see, I think the way that Farage and these guys talk about Theresa May is I think they see a very different Theresa May to the one I see. I see somebody who is trying to make Brexit happen, whatever the cost and whatever the consequences.
Let's talk about Theresa May, but let's talk about Jeremy Corbyn briefly, if we can. And it's probably a contentious one for you. You said I'm Labour. You said my children are Labour. Corbyn seems, I don't know, we have two political leaders at the moment. You're saying she has a difficult job. She took it on. He doesn't seem to say an awful lot. He could make Labour the party of leave and ask for a second referendum, all of that. Is he more interested in getting into number 10? He seems to have done nothing as well about anti-Semitism. The problem is, not getting into a huge debate about that, people are leaving Labour. That is a fact, whether you like it or not. Has that ever crossed your mind, Alastair Campbell?
What, to leave?
Yeah. Because the party of today is nothing like the party that you and everybody else that was part of New Labour got into power in '97. Not in any which way, is it?
It's certainly different. And my partner Fiona, she had a piece in the Observer a couple of weeks ago where she said that she was finding it really, really difficult and was sort of waking up every day and thinking, look, can I stay in this? And I have days like that too. I think one of the worst things about excuse me, the way that politics is debated now is this constant sort of questioning of other people's motivations. So, like, for example, I mentioned the New European. They did a front page this week very critical of Corbyn, and now, as it happens, I wasn't involved in it because I've been away. But
are you critical of Jeremy Corbyn?
I have been very critical of Jeremy Corbyn.
Why?
Well, because on Brexit, I just don't think we're in the right place now. But what I do, I think that, as I said to you earlier, I think Brexit is a right-wing operation. I think it's going to do real damage to the people that we exist to try to help and to support. And but I don't. Anyway, the point I was going to make is that all these conspiracy theories start going. So, this is all part of a plot to kind of do in Jeremy, or it's all part of sort of trying to get a new party going. And we talked earlier about conviction politician. I am absolutely passionately of the view that Brexit is going to be a disaster for the country. Now, I can't stop myself thinking that. And whilst I have people like you wanting to talk to me, and hopefully some of your listeners wanting to listen to me, I'm going to keep saying that.
Yeah.
And so we have a situation now where both the main parties, even though they have a slightly different stance on parts of the Brexit debate, they're both basically saying Brexit has to happen, whatever the cost, whatever the consequences.
Has Corbyn, Mr. Trick, by not positioning Labour as the Remain party, has he not got a massive opportunity here? I don't know what it is about Jeremy Corbyn, and I'm not being disrespectful because I believe he's a decent man. I just think people find it quite hard to like him, to be perfectly honest. I don't think he has a likability factor, does he?
I think there's a lot of people like him a lot, and he's got a following that, frankly, having seen him over several decades, I think it's been extraordinary to see it develop. However, one of the things that was interesting when the piece that I mentioned that Fiona wrote in The Observer is that, the number of Corbyn supporters who then come out and say, oh, well, get lost, go and join the Tories or whatever it might be. It's a very odd approach to take, to try to turn your existing supporters away.
Yeah. And maybe Momentum want to do that because they want complete control. One final question. You've been amazing.
Momentum, to be fair, are pushing in the right direction on Brexit. And your point about is he missing a trick? It may be that he just doesn't believe enough in this. But yeah. I do think that this idea. Yes, the country voted for this. They voted to leave, but they did not vote for this mess. They did not vote to be poorer. They did not vote to stockpile food and medicines. They did not vote to have to sort of, completely throw up business arrangements and put the peace process in Northern Ireland in peril and so forth. And I think if Jeremy Corbyn did stand up and say, OK, this is a mess, this is not what the people voted for, Theresa May, bring back the deal and let's put that to people's vote, I think it would get him into Downing Street, as it happens.
Which is a frightening prospect for many people. One final question, Alastair Campbell. Do we need... With this sort of impasse, you just said they're both barking up the same tree. Theresa sat in number 10 trying to get this through. Jeremy's sat on the periphery wondering whether he should stick his head above the parapet. I suspect that Corbyn thinks if he just keeps quiet, she's going to shoot herself in the foot. Do we, final question, need another option for the centre ground in UK politics?
Well, you had the Lib Dems at the last election, and the Lib Dems were the only party absolutely right out there putting the flag in the ground for staying in the European Union unequivocally, and they didn't do terribly well. I don't know is the short answer, but I think at the moment, where politics is at the moment, I think that Brexit is the single most important issue that we're facing. So for now, I am absolutely in the business of trying to persuade both of the main parties that they're in the wrong place and persuade the country, people, to put pressure on their MPs to make sure that whatever deal she brings back now, and we know from her own lips that any deal is going to be worse than what we've got, that deal goes back to the people, that they can have a say on the final deal. And I think the reason that Rees-Mogg and Farage and these guys are getting desperate is because they know, for all their bluster and for all the fantasies that they peddle, that actually the country deep down does not want to do this.
Alastair Campbell, I really appreciate your time. It's fascinating listening to you. And as you said, as long as there's breath in your body, you'll keep fighting your corner. Thank you very much indeed for interrupting your holiday. Alastair Campbell on Talk Radio.